Coloring and sealing wood is the traditional way of enhancing its appearance, and even though the technique certainly works very well when it's done properly, it's also something of a hassle. You're dealing with two, sometimes three different products, and at least 3 or 4 different steps to get the results you need. Now, all of this is why colored sealers were invented. They're a one-shot deal that applies color and protection to the wood all in one go. Now, I've got a couple of real-world projects on the go here in my workshop, and I want to show you my current favorite colored sealer in action. For these two projects, I'm using Minwax poly shades in the American chestnut color with a satin sheen. It's currently my favorite shade of medium brown when I'm aiming to create a heritage look on the wood that I'm finishing. The technique I'm going to show you here works for all interior woodwork, furniture, anything inside, and it's a pretty versatile technique, so I expect you'll use it again and again. Regardless of your wood finishing situation, sanding before finishing is essential. There's a couple of reasons why. First of all, it removes the mill marks and any imperfections on the wood. These things often come to the surface more prominently after stain is applied, so consider sanding even if you think your wood looks really good. Now, in the case of the window jamb that I'm going to be finishing before trim installation, sanding is important for another reason too. This wood has been left bare for a couple of years, and so it's picked up some dirt and a little bit of water staining when the windows were left open when it started to rain. And sanding is going to completely remove that and give us a nice clean slate to start with. For the window jamb job that you see here, I'm starting off with a 1/4 sheet finishing sander. That'll do the bulk of the work for me. I'm using 180 grit sandpaper because the wood is fairly smooth. If it was rough at all, I'd start with 120 and then go to 180. Now, after the 1/4 sheet sander's done, I'm going to use my detail sander to get into the nooks and crannies, and finally finish up with some handheld paper to slightly round over the edges of this jamb. That helps the wood to hang on to the finish more tightly in these locations, and I'm going to be using some 120 grit sandpaper for that. Now, it's truly amazing the difference that careful sanding can make to your projects, but before you move on to the staining, you need to vacuum the surface thoroughly. This is much better than just sweeping it off or a tack rag. I really recommend vacuuming. Now, before I put any stain on these window frames, I went to the trouble of completing some test patches because softwood, like this window frame, tends to absorb stain unevenly, and that'll give you a blotchy appearance. In this case, the wood worked really well, so there was no need to take that additional step of using a pre-stain conditioner, which is sometimes required for softwoods to get good results. Polyshades is a one-step product. It includes color and protection all in one shot, so you can just brush on a thin coat and leave it at that. In this case, however, because my favorite color is fairly dark, I opted to wipe the surface of the wood afterwards. Now, there's two reasons for this. First, it helps the wood grain to show through a little more prominently. And second, as in the case of this window frame, it allows me to remove the little bits of product that have gotten on the neighboring vinyl window. As you can see, it comes nice and clean. I also happen to be finishing some pieces of ash in my shop right now. Ash is a hardwood, and so it's not nearly as absorbent as the pine of the window jamb. In this case, 2 coats are really essential to get the rich brown color I'm interested in. In all cases, you'll get smoothest results if you rub the surface with 000 steel wool or a fine 3M rubbing pad after the finish is dried for at least 6 hours. In cases where you'll want additional protection, like with these window jambs, you can apply a coat of wipe-on poly or a brush-grade polyurethane on top of the poly shades. In this case, I'm using Helmsman urethane because it contains a UV inhibitor that will stop the sunlight from deteriorating the finish. Regardless of the exact strategy that you apply to your projects, always finish up by rubbing down with a fine synthetic rubbing pad. You'll achieve really smooth results that you can be very proud of.